Humour here, a Joe. Before I begin this story, I would like to mention that yes, this story is 100% true, and I have only told a few people I am very close to. I want to start out with that because the events that took place almost seem as if they were taken from a movie, but they weren't. When I read most stories on here, I'm not much of a fan of backstories, but to fully grasp this story, I do have to go back a little bit. At the time of this story, I was 17 years old and working a part-time job at a local movie theatre. I absolutely loved working there. The managers were really laid back and the employees were super fun to work with. Me and two of my favourite ushers, people cleaning the theatres, all worked the same shift from 5:30 to 10:15, except I was closer, so I stayed at work until 1 a.m, when all the movies ended and everybody left. Well, when we came in, there was an ambulance and a big part of our lobby was roped off and we all sat upstairs waiting to clock in, wondering what had happened. When we clocked in and got downstairs, we talked to somebody who had been working the whole day. They told us a man had died earlier that day due to what they believed was a heart attack. The whole event actually terrified us, but left us curious. Death in our area like that weren't common, so it was somewhat disturbing. Now, this happened around the time a movie called Ouija was coming out. The coincidence that this happened was horrible, because one of my good friends had the idea of going to his house after work and bringing the Ouija board in to see if we could contact this man who had just died. At first, I decided there was no way I would play with it, due to my religious beliefs. I knew that if I played with the board, we could get into some horrible stuff. Yet, I decided that we could try it out, and if things got bad, we would end it quick. This is where things would take a quick turn. My buddy left and got the board. The managers usually sit in an office downstairs chatting and doing their closing routines. I rushed through mine, so that night we could see what we could find. From the start, I should have known to stop playing with this horrible thing, but I never realised it. When we started, we couldn't get any answers, but my buddy kept asking and asking. But as soon as I spoke, the piece moved. I asked a question like what my name was, just to see if it would move, and it worked. Now I thought it was my buddies messing with me. I asked what the name of my girlfriend at the time was, and it answered correctly. Then before I could speak, it gave off the name of a guy. At the time, it didn't make sense, but months later, it was the name my girlfriend was cheating on me with. We went on, and eventually, after enough personal questions, I realised it wasn't my buddies. Things only got worse. We started asking about the man who died there, and the board answered our questions. Towards the end of our questioning, the board began to act strange. Long story short, we soon found out that we hadn't got a hold of the man who died. Instead, we got in touch with the demon. And the most haunting part about this is that the demon only answered me. This demon had a specific liking to me. Before we were able to finish, we heard a manager walking up the stairs and quickly hit the board and my two buddies hid as well. The manager came up but didn't notice anything, and it was nothing for us to sit upstairs. As soon as the managers left, my buddies bailed, saying they were too scared, as was I. We had only forgot one crucial part of a Ouija board experience. We forgot to say goodbye. I never realised it until the next day, but I did know all the rules of the Ouija board. The next day is when things got bad for me. Again, this is all true, and it's the worst experience I've had in my entire life. The next day was a Friday night, and my parents had left to go out of town for a softball tournament with my sister. I hadn't thought any more on last night since nothing had been added up on top of it. Around 5 o'clock, I was sitting in my living room watching The Office, easily one of my favourite TV shows of all time, when out of nowhere, the mood and feeling in my house changed. About as soon as I looked up, I witnessed a chair from my kitchen thrown across the room. I was in absolute panic. I ran out of my house, grabbing my keys and my wallet, sitting by the door, and went to my car driving off. I went to the Walmart closest to my house since it was a public place and I could gain my composure. After about half an hour of walking around, I decided I needed to get whatever was following me out of my house or out of my life. I spent the next hour and a half at Starbucks researching all the things I could do. Luckily, at my local mall was a game store that sold Ouija boards, so I bought one. Now I know playing with one alone is bad, but I had contacted my buddies to see if anything strange happened to them, but they didn't have anything, so I decided it was just me the demon wanted to talk to, and nobody else. So I took this back to my house with the intention of ending it there. A lot happened while I was playing with the Ouija board, and I spent probably about 45 minutes talking to the demon who was now living with me. To keep this story short, I talked back and forth with this demon, and due to my religious background, I refused to give up against it. The demon at one point said, "Sell soul," but I refused to do that. I said prayers in my house, calling to God to end it. Towards the end, there was silence on the board. I took my hands off the piece to Google what silence meant during the Ouija board session to see if I'd gotten rid of the demon. About as soon as I took my hand off the piece, it flew straight to goodbye. I knew then that my mission was done, so I cut the board up into 7 pieces and buried it outside my house. My parents don't know of this, and hardly anybody I know actually knows this story, but I felt like it could be shared.